The Kepler 442b colony had been silent for 3 standard days. Commander Sarah Ghost Martinez pressed her eye to the scope, watching the alien structures that had sprouted like metallic fungi across what used to be New Eden's agricultural district. The Zephyrian invasion force had moved with terrifying efficiency, their obsidian ships descending from the void like drops of liquid night. 27,000 human colonists. Gone. Not dead. The reconnaissance drones had confirmed that much. Worse, harvested. The Zephyrians didn't kill their prey outright. They collected them, processed them, turned them into something else entirely. Intelligence reports from other worlds painted a horrifying picture of humans transformed into living batteries, their neural patterns stripped away to power alien war machines. Martinez adjusted her position in the rocky outcrop, her adaptive camouflage suit shifting to match the reddish stone perfectly. Beside her, Petty Officer James "Tank" Rodriguez breathed so quietly, she could barely detect the rise and fall of his chest. The SEAL team had been inserted via stealth pod 48 hours ago, sliding through the planet's magnetosphere like ghosts through walls. The Zephyrians had made one critical error in their assessment of human capabilities. They had studied Earth's militaries from a distance, analyzing conventional warfare patterns and standard tactical doctrines. What they hadn't accounted for was humanity's gift for improvisation, for turning desperate situations into devastating advantages. "Contact. 2 clicks northwest," whispered Rodriguez through the tactical net. His voice was barely a breath, transmitted through bone conduction rather than radio waves. "Harvester convoy 12 vehicles heading toward Grid 7. Martinez shifted her scope. The Zephyrian harvester vehicles moved like massive insects, their 6 articulated legs carrying them smoothly over the uneven terrain. Each one contained approximately 50 human captives according to their intelligence briefings. The aliens' biotechnology was impressive, but it came with a weakness they probably didn't even recognize. The Zephyrians processed information through collective consciousness networks. Individual initiative was not just rare among their species. It was physiologically impossible. Every action was coordinated through their hive mind communication systems. It made them incredibly efficient at large-scale operations, but it also made them predictable. "Razor, you seeing this?" Martinez sub-vocalized into her comm unit. The response came from Lieutenant Lisa Razor Chen, positioned 3 kilometers to the east with the rest of Alpha Team. "Confirmed. Count 12 harvesters, 6 escort walkers. They're following Route 7 exactly as predicted." The SEAL teams had spent the last 2 days mapping Zephyrian movement patterns. The aliens followed geometric precision in everything they did. Their patrol routes formed perfect mathematical spirals. Their construction followed crystalline patterns that would have made a geologist weep with admiration. Beautiful, efficient, and utterly lacking in human unpredictability. Martinez checked her chronometer. 14 minutes until the main show began. She thought about Captain Elena Banshee Vasquez, probably running her final pre-flight checks 300 kilometers above them in the modified A-10 Thunderbolt. The plane had been retrofitted with experimental stealth technology and equipped with weapons that would make the Zephyrians reconsider their invasion strategy. The irony wasn't lost on Martinez. The A-10 was ancient by military standards, a design that predated faster-than-light travel by decades, but sometimes the old ways were the best ways. The Warthog had been built for one purpose: killing ground targets and surviving everything the enemy could throw at it. The alien modifications had only made it deadlier. "Movement on the western perimeter," reported Sergeant Mike Bulldog Thompson from his overwatch position. 3 Zephyrian scout drones running a standard search pattern. Martinez frowned. The drones weren't part of the predicted pattern. Either the aliens were adapting faster than expected, or something had spooked them. Neither possibility was encouraging. She studied the alien scouts through her scope. They moved like mechanical birds, their wings barely stirring the air as they glided between the rocky formations. Their sensor arrays swept back and forth with metronomic precision, searching for any sign of human presence. The SEAL teams had been trained for this exact scenario. Operation Silent Thunder had been developed specifically to counter Zephyrian occupation tactics. The plan was elegant in its simplicity: infiltrate, observe, and coordinate a precision strike that would cripple the alien harvesting operation while minimizing human casualties. But plans had a way of changing when contact was made with the enemy. "Ghost, we've got a problem." Rodriguez's voice carried a note of tension that made Martinez's blood run cold. The Harvester convoy just diverted from Route 7. They're heading directly toward Grid 4. Grid 4 was the location of New Eden's primary school. According to their intelligence, over 300 children were being held there in some kind of processing facility. If the Harvesters reached that location, those children would be loaded onto the vehicles and transported to the main Zephyrian ship for conversion. Martinez ran the calculations in her head. The convoy would reach Grid 4 in 23 minutes. The scheduled airstrike wasn't planned for another 11 minutes, and even then, it would take time for Banshee to reach the new target coordinates. She made the decision that separated human soldiers from alien drones. All teams, this is Ghost. We're moving to intercept. I repeat, we are moving to intercept the Harvester convoy. Ghost, that's not the mission. Chen's voice carried a note of warning. We're supposed to wait for air support. The mission just changed, Martinez replied, already moving down from her position. Those kids don't have time for us to wait for the perfect moment. She knew what she was asking. 6 Navy SEALs against 12 Harvester vehicles and their escorts. The odds were mathematically impossible, but mathematics had never stopped humans from doing the impossible before. The Zephyrians were about to learn why humanity had earned its reputation as the galaxy's most dangerous species. Not because humans were stronger or faster or more advanced, but because when the moment came, when everything was on the line, humans would charge straight into hell itself to protect their own, and sometimes, just sometimes, they would drag their enemies down with them. Rodriguez moved like liquid shadow across the broken landscape, his enhanced combat suit adapting to every surface he touched. Behind him, Martinez and the rest of Bravo team flowed through the terrain with the practiced ease of predators, who had hunted in environments ranging from Earth's deepest oceans to the methane storms of Titan, the Zephyrian Harvester. Convoy was still 7 minutes away from Grid 4, but those 7 minutes might as well have been 7 seconds. Martinez could see the alien vehicles through her tactical display, their insectoid forms moving with mechanical precision toward the school complex where 300 human children waited in ignorance of their fate. Bulldog. Status report. Martinez subvocalized as she vaulted over a fallen concrete barrier that had once marked the boundary of a residential district. In position, Ghost. I have eyes on the lead Harvester. Those escort walkers are packing some serious firepower. Thompson's voice carried the calm professionalism of a man who had faced impossible odds before and lived to tell about it. The Zephyrian escort walkers were 4-meter tall, bipedal machines that moved with unsettling grace. Their plasma cannons could punch through a meter of reinforced steel, and their defensive shields could deflect anything short of a direct nuclear strike. On paper, they were invincible, but paper had never met a Navy SEAL with a grudge and a bag full of experimental explosives. Martinez checked her equipment one final time. The electromagnetic pulse charges were prototypes, designed specifically to disrupt Zephyrian biotechnology. The aliens' greatest strength was also their greatest weakness. Their technology relied on organic neural networks that, while incredibly sophisticated, were vulnerable to the right kind of electromagnetic interference. Chen, what's your team's position? Martinez asked as she slid into cover behind an overturned transport vehicle. 2 clicks southeast and closing fast. We'll be in position for crossfire in 3 minutes. Chen's voice was steady, but Martinez could hear the controlled breathing of someone moving at full tactical speed. The plan was simple in concept, hellishly difficult in execution. Both SEAL teams would engage the convoy simultaneously from opposite directions, focusing their fire on the escort walkers while avoiding the Harvester vehicles themselves. The goal wasn't to destroy the Harvesters, but to disable their escorts and force them to stop moving toward Grid 4. Then they would wait for Banshee to arrive and turn the entire area into a crater. Rodriguez raised his hand, signaling immediate halt. Martinez froze, her enhanced hearing picking up the subsonic thrum of Zephyrian communication networks. The aliens were talking to each other, their electromagnetic chatter filling the air like digital whispers. Through her scope, Martinez could see the lead escort walker had stopped. Its sensor array was rotating slowly, scanning the surrounding area with mechanical patience. The entire convoy had halted, their collective consciousness apparently detecting something amiss. Martinez cursed silently. The Zephyrians' hive mind made them almost impossible to surprise. Any unusual reading detected by one unit was instantly shared with all others. It was like trying to sneak up on a creature with 10,000 eyes. But humans had been overcoming impossible odds since they first picked up rocks and decided to hunt mammoths. All teams. Execute Plan Delta, Martinez whispered into her comm unit. Plan Delta was humanity at its finest. Instead of trying to hide from the Zephyrian sensors, they would overwhelm them. Every SEAL carried a collection of decoy devices, small transmitters that mimicked human electromagnetic signatures. Deployed correctly, they would create the impression of a much larger force spread across a wide area. Rodriguez pulled the pins on 3 decoy devices and hurled them in different directions. Each one immediately began broadcasting the electronic signature of a human soldier. Across the battlefield, the other SEALs were doing the same, filling the airwaves with false targets. The effect on the Zephyrian convoy was immediate and gratifying. The escort walkers began spinning their sensor arrays frantically, trying to process the sudden appearance of dozens of human soldiers, where moments before there had been nothing. Their collective consciousness became a chaos of contradictory information. Martinez smiled grimly. The aliens' greatest strength had just become their greatest weakness. Their perfect coordination was breaking down as their shared network became overloaded with false data. Now, she shouted, abandoning stealth for speed. The electromagnetic pulse charges detonated simultaneously across the battlefield, invisible waves of energy washing over the Zephyrian convoy like a digital tsunami. The escort walkers stumbled, their organic neural networks momentarily disrupted by the electromagnetic interference. Rodriguez was already moving, his assault rifle spitting armor-piercing rounds at the nearest walker's leg joints. The Zephyrian machine tried to return fire, but its targeting systems were still rebooting from the EMP attack. Its plasma bolt went wide, turning a section of roadway into molten glass. Martinez sprinted toward the harvester vehicles, her mind focused on the children trapped inside. The harvesters themselves were more heavily shielded than their escorts, but they also moved more slowly. If she could reach the lead vehicle and plant her remaining charges on its control systems, she might be able to disable the entire convoy. The nearest escort walker was recovering from the EMP attack, its systems coming back online with alarming speed. Its sensors locked onto Martinez as she ran across the open ground, and she could see its plasma cannon beginning to track her movement. She dove behind a chunk of rubble just as the walker fired, the superheated plasma passing close enough to singe her hair. The heat was incredible, like standing next to a star, but she was still alive, still moving, still fighting. That was the thing about humans that the galaxy's other species never quite understood. They didn't fight because they expected to win. They fought because they couldn't do anything else. Surrender wasn't in their vocabulary when innocent lives were at stake. The lead harvester was 30 meters away now, its biomechanical systems humming with alien energy. Through the transparent panels in its cargo bay, Martinez could see human figures huddled inside. Not children from the school, but other colonists, their faces blank with whatever neural suppression technology the Zephyrians used on their captives. She was going to get them out. All of them, even if it killed her. 300 kilometers above the battlefield, Captain Elena Vasquez ran through her final systems check with the mechanical precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Her A-10 Thunderbolt hung in the thin upper atmosphere like a metallic predator, its experimental stealth coating making it nearly invisible to conventional sensors. But the Zephyrians didn't use conventional sensors. Vasquez had been monitoring the ground team's tactical frequency, listening to Martinez's team engage the harvester convoy with a mixture of professional admiration and growing concern. The SEALs were outnumbered and outgunned, fighting a delaying action against an enemy that should have overwhelmed them in the first 30 seconds of contact. The fact that they were still alive said everything about human adaptability and nothing good about the mission timeline. Banshee, this is Ghost. Martinez's voice crackled through the comm system, punctuated by the distinctive whine of plasma weapons. We need that air support now. The convoy is stopped, but we can't hold them much longer. Vasquez checked her navigation display, still 4 minutes out from the target zone at maximum speed. 4 minutes might as well be 4 hours when SEALs were fighting for their lives on the ground. She pushed the throttle forward, feeling the familiar pressure as her modified Warthog accelerated toward supersonic speed. The A-10 had never been designed for high-speed flight, but the alien upgrades had changed that. The new engines were based on captured Zephyrian technology, their organic power systems capable of producing thrust levels that would have torn the original airframe apart. The irony was beautiful. She was going to use alien technology to kill aliens. Ground team, this is Banshee. I'm pushing hard, but you need to keep those harvesters stationary for 3 more minutes. Can you do that? Rodriguez's voice answered, his usual calm demeanor strained by the sound of nearby explosions. We're doing our best up here, but these escort walkers are tougher than advertised. EMP charges only stunned them for about 30 seconds. Vasquez wasn't surprised. The Zephyrians learned fast, adapting their technology to counter human weapons almost as quickly as humans could deploy them. But adaptation was a two-way street, and humans had been playing that game for a lot longer than most species realized. She activated her targeting systems, watching as the alien landscape below resolved into tactical clarity. The modified sensor package could see through Zephyrian stealth technology, revealing the true scope of the invasion force. What she saw made her blood run cold. The harvester convoy was just the beginning. Scattered across the planet's surface were dozens of similar formations, all moving toward population centers with mechanical determination. The Zephyrians weren't just harvesting the colonists of New Eden. They were processing the entire world, 27,000 humans. That was just the beginning. Control, this is Banshee, she transmitted on the encrypted command frequency. I'm seeing a much larger Zephyrian presence than intelligence predicted. This isn't a raid, it's a full-scale harvesting operation. The response came back from Admiral Chen aboard the orbital command ship. Confirmed, Banshee. We're detecting similar patterns on 3 other colony worlds. The Zephyrians are accelerating their timeline. Vasquez felt a cold fury settle in her chest. The Zephyrians had made this personal. They weren't just fighting humanity's military forces, they were targeting civilians, children, families. That was a line you didn't cross when dealing with humans. The ground team's position appeared on her tactical display, marked by the distinctive electromagnetic signatures of human weapons and the larger, more organic patterns of Zephyrian technology. She could see the convoy had stopped moving, but the escort walkers were systematically destroying the SEAL's cover positions. 2 minutes out. Ghost, I need you to mark the primary targets, Vasquez transmitted as she began her attack approach. I'm carrying experimental ordnance, but I only get 1 pass at this. Roger, Banshee. Painting targets now. 3 laser designators appeared on Vasquez's targeting display, marking the largest escort walkers. The SEALs were keeping the harvesters intact, focusing their efforts on the military escorts. It was smart tactics, but it also meant the children in Grid 4 were still in immediate danger. Vasquez made a decision that would have gotten her court-martialed under normal circumstances. She diverted from her assigned target zone and headed directly for Grid 4. The school complex appeared on her sensors, a cluster of buildings surrounded by what looked like a Zephyrian processing facility. Energy readings indicated approximately 300 human life signs in the central structure, all showing the neural suppression patterns characteristic of harvested colonists. Children. 300 children, waiting to be turned into living batteries for alien war machines. Control, this is Banshee. I'm diverting to neutralize the Grid 4 facility before engaging the convoy. Negative, Banshee. Your orders are to support the ground team. Vasquez checked her weapon systems. The experimental ordnance included something the Zephyrians had never encountered before. Kinetic penetrators designed specifically to pierce their biomechanical armor, without causing secondary explosions that might harm human captives. Control. With respect, sometimes orders need to be interpreted creatively. Those are kids down there. She could almost hear Admiral Chen's resigned sigh across the comm channel. Banshee, you are weapons-free. Bring our people home. Vasquez smiled grimly as she began her attack run. The A-10 dropped through the atmosphere like a falling star, its stealth coating shimmering as it shed heat. Below her, the Zephyrian facility grew larger, its organic architecture looking like a cancer on the landscape. The aliens had made one critical mistake in their understanding of human psychology. They thought in terms of acceptable losses, calculated risks, and logical tactical decisions. They didn't understand that when human children were threatened, logic went out the window. They were about to learn why humanity's enemies called them the crazy ones, the species that would charge into certain death if it meant protecting their young. 1 minute out. Time to show the Zephyrians what happened when they messed with Earth's children. The Zephyrian processing facility at Grid 4 pulsed with bioluminescent energy, its organic walls expanding and contracting like the breathing of some massive creature. Inside those walls, 300 human children sat in perfect silence, their young minds suppressed by neural inhibitors that turned them into docile cattle awaiting slaughter. Vasquez could see them on her thermal imaging display, small heat signatures arranged in neat rows within the central structure. The sight filled her with a rage so pure it felt like ice in her veins. She had 2 children of her own back on Earth, and the thought of them in that facility made her want to turn the entire planet into glass. But rage was a luxury she couldn't afford. The children needed precision, not fury. Her A-10 screamed through the atmosphere at nearly twice the speed of sound, its modified engines leaving a barely visible contrail against the alien sky. The Zephyrian defenders were beginning to react to her approach, their sensor arrays tracking her descent with mechanical patience. Anti-aircraft plasma began rising from the facility's defensive positions, streams of superheated energy that could turn her aircraft into vapor if they connected. But the A-10 had been designed to survive exactly this kind of punishment, and the alien modifications had only made it tougher. Vasquez rolled inverted and pulled into a steep dive, using the planet's gravity to accelerate past the plasma streams. Her targeting computer locked onto the facility's primary power distribution nodes, organic structures that pulsed with the bioelectric energy that powered the entire complex. Banshee to ground team. I'm beginning my attack run on Grid 4. Keep those harvesters locked down for 30 more seconds. Martinez's voice came back strained but determined. Roger, Banshee. We've got company incoming from the west. Looks like Zephyrian reinforcements, but we'll hold position. Vasquez's respect for the SEAL teams went up another notch. They were facing impossible odds and still prioritizing the mission over their own survival. That was what separated human special forces from everyone else in the galaxy. They didn't just fight to win, they fought to protect others, even when it meant certain death. She armed her kinetic penetrators, experimental weapons that used magnetic acceleration to fire depleted uranium rounds at incredible velocities. The projectiles were designed to punch through Zephyrian biomechanical armor while minimizing collateral damage to anything organic in the immediate vicinity. The facility's defensive systems were fully active now, streams of plasma creating a deadly light show in the sky above Grid 4. Vasquez flew through it like she was threading a needle at supersonic speed, her aircraft's armor absorbing hits that would have destroyed lesser machines. The first kinetic penetrator left her weapons bay with a sound like thunder, accelerating to nearly 10% of light speed in the space of a few meters. It struck the facility's primary power node with the force of a small asteroid, punching through the organic armor and severing the bioelectric conduits that fed energy to the neural suppression systems. Immediately, her thermal sensors showed increased activity among the human heat signatures inside the building. The children were waking up. The second penetrator targeted the facility's communication array, the organic structure that connected it to the broader Zephyrian network. The alien defenders would find themselves cut off from their collective consciousness, forced to operate as individuals for the first time in their evolutionary history. Vasquez pulled out of her dive just meters above the facility's roof, her aircraft's belly scraping against organic spires that reached up like grasping fingers. Behind her, secondary explosions rippled through the structure as critical systems failed in cascade. But her job was only half done. The children were awake, but they were still trapped inside an alien facility crawling with Zephyrian guards. She needed to clear them a path to safety. Control, this is Banshee. Grid 4 facility is partially neutralized, but I need ground support to extract the civilians. Negative, Banshee. All ground assets are committed to other operations. Vasquez checked her fuel and ammunition levels. She had enough for one more attack run, maybe 2 if she pushed it. But the Zephyrians were already adapting to her tactics, their remaining defensive systems tracking her flight path with increasing accuracy. She made another decision that would probably end her career. Ghost, this is Banshee. I'm gonna try something stupid. When you see the fireworks, get those kids out of there. Banshee, what are you planning? Vasquez didn't answer. Instead, she pulled her A-10 into a climbing turn, gaining altitude for what any sane pilot would consider a suicide run. The Zephyrian facility sprawled below her like a cancer on the landscape, its remaining defenses tracking her movement with malevolent patience. The experimental weapons included one item that hadn't been tested in combat conditions, a quantum destabilizer designed to disrupt the molecular bonds that held Zephyrian biomechanical structures together. The weapon had only been fired twice in controlled conditions, and both tests had produced results far beyond the designer's expectations. She was about to find out what it would do to an entire facility. The quantum destabilizer, armed with a low harmonic tone that seemed to resonate in her bones. Below her, the Zephyrian defenders were preparing for her next attack run, their plasma weapons charging to full power. They probably expected another precision strike, another surgical attack designed to minimize collateral damage. They were about to learn that sometimes, surgical precision wasn't what the situation required. Vasquez rolled inverted and pushed into the steepest dive her aircraft could handle, the ground rushing up to meet her at a rate that made her inner ear scream in protest. The Zephyrian weapons opened fire, filling the air around her with streams of superheated death. One plasma bolt clipped her port wing, vaporizing a section of armor and sending warning alarms screaming through her cockpit. Another passed close enough to her canopy to fog the reinforced material with condensed metal vapor. She held her dive until the last possible second, until the facility's organic walls filled her entire field of vision. Then she fired the quantum destabilizer and pulled out of the dive with enough G-force to make her vision tunnel and her consciousness waver. Behind her, the Grid 4 facility began to come apart at the molecular level. The quantum destabilizer's effect on the Zephyrian facility was unlike anything Vasquez had ever witnessed. The organic structure didn't explode or collapse in any conventional sense. Instead, it simply began to dissolve, its molecular bonds unraveling like a sweater with a pulled thread. Sections of wall became transparent, then ceased to exist entirely. The bioluminescent conduits that carried energy throughout the complex flickered and died as their constituent atoms forgot how to maintain coherent form. It was beautiful and terrifying, like watching reality itself come undone. Below her, Martinez and the SEAL teams were already moving toward the dissolving facility. Through her sensors, Vasquez could see the human heat signatures inside the building beginning to move as well. The children were not only awake, they were mobile. "Ghost, this is Banshee. The facility is coming down, but it's going to take a few minutes for complete structural failure. You've got a window to get those kids out." Martinez's voice crackled back through the comm system, punctuated by the sound of small arms fire. "Roger, Banshee. We're moving in now. What's your status on the Harvester convoy?" Vasquez checked her tactical display. The Harvester convoy had resumed movement during her attack on Grid 4, taking advantage of her absence to break through the SEAL perimeter. They were now less than 2 minutes away from the school complex. Their escort walkers having dealt with most of the decoy devices and false targets. She was out of experimental ordnance, down to conventional weapons and rapidly depleting fuel reserves. But the A-10 had been built for exactly this kind of close air support mission, and Vasquez had been flying Warthogs longer than some of her ground team had been alive. "I'm moving to engage the convoy now. Keep your heads down, this is going to get loud." The Harvester convoy spread across the landscape like mechanical locusts, their insectoid forms moving with the relentless determination of machines that knew no fear or doubt. The escort walkers had formed a protective screen around the slower Harvester vehicles, their plasma cannons sweeping the sky for any sign of aerial threats. Vasquez approached from the south, using a ridge line to mask her approach until the last possible moment. The convoy's sensors were focused on the Grid 4 facility, and the SEAL teams moving through its dissolving structure. They weren't expecting an attack from their flank. She popped up over the ridge at an altitude of barely 50 meters, her 30mm A-10 cannon already spinning up to firing speed. The Avenger cannon was a relic from an earlier era of warfare, but sometimes the old ways were the best ways. Depleted uranium rounds at nearly 4,000 rounds per minute could solve a lot of problems. The nearest escort walker turned toward her with mechanical precision, its plasma cannon tracking her aircraft's movement. But Vasquez had been flying combat missions since before that machine was grown in whatever alien factory had produced it. She rolled left just as the walker fired, the plasma bolt passing harmlessly beneath her aircraft. Her return fire was considerably less harmless. The GAU-8 spoke with a sound like the universe tearing apart, sending a stream of uranium penetrators into the walker's center mass. The Zephyrian machine staggered as its organic armor was shredded, its internal systems exposed to the devastating fire of humanity's most efficient close support weapon. The walker tried to return fire, but its targeting systems were already failing. The plasma bolt went wide, striking one of the harvester vehicles and causing a secondary explosion that sent organic debris raining across the battlefield. Vasquez cursed as she saw human figures stumbling out of the damaged harvester. Colonists, still alive despite everything the Zephyrians had done to them. She had to be more careful with her targeting. But careful wasn't going to save the children at Grid 4. A second escort walker was already moving to engage her, its plasma cannon charging with the distinctive whine of alien energy systems. This one was smarter than its predecessor, using the harvester vehicles as cover to mask its approach. But Vasquez had fought aliens before, and she knew their weaknesses as well as their strengths. Zephyrian tactical programming was incredibly sophisticated, but it was also predictable. The aliens optimized for efficiency, not creativity. She pulled into a vertical climb, using her aircraft's superior maneuverability to gain altitude advantage. The escort walker followed her ascent with its weapons, but it couldn't elevate its guns beyond a certain angle without exposing its vulnerable back sections to ground fire that was already incoming from Martinez's team. The SEALs had reached the convoy's perimeter and were engaging the walker from behind, their armor-piercing rounds targeting the joints and sensor arrays that kept the machine operational. It was like watching ants attack a giant, but ants that knew exactly where to bite for maximum effect. Vasquez rolled inverted and dove back toward the walker, coming at it from an angle its defensive programming couldn't counter. Her second burst from the GAU-8 took the machine's legs out from under it, sending it crashing to the ground in a tangle of metal and organic components. But there were still 4 more escort walkers, and her ammunition was running low. "Ghost, I'm seeing movement from Grid 4. Looks like your extraction is working." Martinez's voice came back breathless but triumphant. "Confirmed, Banshee. We've got approximately 200 children clear of the facility, with more coming out every minute. But we need transport, and we need it now." Vasquez checked her fuel gauges. She had maybe 10 minutes of flight time left. Not nearly enough to provide sustained cover for an evacuation, but 10 minutes might be enough to buy the ground teams the time they needed to get the children to safety. The remaining escort walkers were converging on her position, their collective consciousness coordinating their attacks with mechanical precision. But precision was a double-edged sword. It made them effective, but it also made them predictable. And Vasquez had one more surprise for them. Martinez hauled another child from the dissolving facility, a girl who couldn't have been more than 8 years old, her eyes still glazed from the neural suppression but alert enough to follow basic instructions. Around him, the other SEALs were moving with mechanical efficiency, forming human chains to evacuate the children from the quantum destabilized structure. The facility continued its molecular collapse, walls becoming transparent and then simply ceasing to exist. But the process was accelerating, and Martinez could see that they had maybe 5 more minutes before the entire complex became uninhabitable. "Rodriguez, how many more inside?" he called to his teammate who was coordinating the evacuation from the facility's main corridor. "Approximately 70, but they're in the lower levels. The quantum effect is moving faster than we thought." Martinez did the math in his head. 70 children, 5 minutes, and a structure that was literally dissolving around them. Even with all 6 SEALs working at maximum efficiency, they weren't going to make it unless they changed the rules. "All teams, this is Ghost. We're implementing Emergency Protocol 7. Emergency Protocol 7 was something that existed only in the theoretical realm of SEAL training scenarios. It involved using shaped charges to blow holes in building structures to create multiple evacuation routes simultaneously. No one had ever actually used it in a real combat situation, partly because it was incredibly dangerous and partly because it required precise timing that bordered on the supernatural. But supernatural timing was what SEALs did for a living. "Thompson, Chen, I need you to place charges on the facility support pillars. Levels 2 and 3. Rodriguez, Bulldog, you're with me. We're going down to the lower levels." "Ghost, that's insane." Chen's voice carried a note of professional concern. "If we destabilize the remaining structure while people are still inside, then we better be fast enough to get them out first," Martinez finished. "This is what we trained for, people. Time to show these aliens what human determination looks like." The lower levels of the facility were a nightmare of organic architecture and failing systems. Bioluminescent panels flickered erratically as the quantum destabilizer continued its work, creating pools of shifting light and shadow that made navigation treacherous. The air itself seemed unstable, shimmering with energy patterns that hurt to look at directly. But the children were there, huddled in groups throughout the dissolving maze of corridors and chambers. Their neural suppressors had failed along with everything else, leaving them confused and frightened but capable of following instructions. Rodriguez moved like a man possessed, scooping up children and passing them to Bulldog, who carried them toward the improvised evacuation routes. Martinez coordinated the effort, his enhanced tactical display helping him navigate the constantly changing layout of the collapsing structure. Above them, Vasquez was still engaging the escort walkers, her GAU-8 cannon providing a steady rhythm of destruction that kept the Zephyrian reinforcements at bay. But Martinez could hear the change in the firing pattern that meant she was running low on ammunition. "Banshee, what's your status?" he called while helping a boy who couldn't have been more than 6 years old. "Running on fumes and prayers." "Ghost, I've got maybe 2 more minutes of useful firepower. Then I'm going to have to try something creative." Martinez knew what creative meant when applied to A-10 pilots. It usually involved using the aircraft itself as a weapon, trading the pilot's life for strategic advantage. That wasn't going to happen on his watch. "Chen Thompson's status on those charges?" "Placed and ready, Ghost, just give us the word." Martinez looked around the lower level. They had cleared approximately half of the remaining children, but the quantum effect was accelerating. Sections of floor were beginning to become transparent, revealing the facility's foundation structures beneath. He made the kind of decision that separated human commanders from artificial intelligences. All teams were detonating in 30 seconds. "I don't care if you're in the blast radius, get these kids to the surface." The next 30 seconds stretched like hours. Rodriguez appeared at Martinez's shoulder carrying 2 more children, his face grim with determination. Bulldog was already moving toward the evacuation route, a child under each arm and a third following close behind. Martinez grabbed the last group of children from the lower level, 6 kids who were holding hands in a chain to keep from getting separated. They looked up at him with eyes that had seen too much, but they followed his instructions without question. "All teams, execute charges now." The shaped charges detonated simultaneously, their precisely calculated explosions creating multiple holes in the facility's remaining structure. But instead of bringing the building down, they opened new pathways to the surface, allowing the evacuation teams to move faster than the spreading quantum dissolution. Martinez reached the surface just as the final sections of the lower level ceased to exist, taking with them any trace that the Zephyrian facility had ever been there. Around him, nearly 300 children stood in the alien sunlight, free from their captors and alive against all odds. But the escort walkers were still coming, and Vasquez was out of ammunition. It was time for the final phase of the operation, the part that would determine whether their impossible rescue mission became a legend or a tragedy. Vasquez watched her ammunition counter hit 0 with the kind of calm that came from years of flying into impossible situations. The GAU-8 cannon fell silent, its familiar roar replaced by the whine of her engines and the distant sound of plasma weapons firing from the surface below. 4 escort walkers remained operational, converging on the evacuation site where Martinez and his team were trying to move 300 children to safety. Without air support, the SEALs would be overwhelmed in minutes. The Zephyrian machines were designed for exactly this kind of situation. Systematic elimination of human resistance through overwhelming firepower. But Elena Vasquez had not survived 15 years of combat flying by accepting the limitations of her equipment. "Control, this is Banshee. I'm out of conventional ordnance and low on fuel. Requesting permission to engage in non-conventional tactics." Admiral Chen's voice came back immediately, carrying the weight of command decisions that would haunt him regardless of outcome. "Banshee, what are you proposing?" Vasquez checked her aircraft systems one final time. The A-10 was built like a flying tank, designed to absorb punishment that would destroy lesser aircraft. But it was also equipped with something the Zephyrians had never encountered: human ingenuity backed by absolute determination. "I'm going to ram them, sir." These escort walkers have never faced a direct kinetic impact from a 20-ton aircraft moving at combat speed. "Banshee, that's a suicide mission." "Not necessarily, sir. The A-10 was designed to survive this kind of impact. And even if it wasn't, those kids down there are worth the risk." The silence on the comm channel stretched for several heartbeats. Then Admiral Chen's voice came back, heavy with the responsibility of command. Banshee, you are authorized for non-conventional engagement. Good hunting. Vasquez smiled grimly as she pushed her throttles to maximum military power. The modified engines responded with a surge of acceleration that pressed her back into her ejection seat. Below her, the escort walkers were spreading out to surround the evacuation site, their plasma cannons charging for what would be a devastating barrage against unprotected civilians. She picked her target carefully. The lead walker was the largest, its sensor arrays marking it as the command unit for the local group. Destroying it would disrupt the others' coordination, buying the ground team precious time to complete the evacuation. The A-10 dove toward the surface like a meteor, its armored nose pointed directly at the walker's center mass. At 500 meters altitude, Vasquez could see the alien machine turning toward her, its weapons tracking her descent with mechanical precision. Plasma bolts began rising to meet her, streams of superheated energy that could vaporize her aircraft if they connected. But the A-10 had been designed by engineers who understood that sometimes you had to fly through hell to reach your target. The plasma bolts struck her aircraft's armored hull and dispersed, their energy absorbed by materials that had been tested against everything from armor-piercing shells to directed energy weapons. At 200 meters, the escort walker fired its main cannon directly at her aircraft. The plasma bolt struck her port engine, causing a catastrophic failure that sent warning alarms screaming through her cockpit. But momentum was on her side now. 30 tons of aircraft and pilot moving at nearly 300 kilometers per hour. The impact was like hitting a mountain. Vasquez felt her consciousness fade as the G-forces overwhelmed her body's ability to function. But even as darkness closed in, she could feel her aircraft continuing forward, its reinforced structure designed to survive exactly this kind of punishment. The escort walker never had a chance. The A-10's armored nose punched through its organic armor like a giant bullet, the aircraft's mass and velocity combining to create a kinetic impact that no amount of alien engineering could resist. The walker collapsed in a shower of metal and biological components, its systems failing in cascade as critical structures were destroyed. But Vasquez's aircraft was still moving, its momentum carrying it through the wreckage and toward the second escort walker. The A-10 had lost its port engine and most of its left wing, but the starboard engine was still functional, and the aircraft's inherent stability kept it flying despite damage that would have destroyed any other plane. The second walker tried to track her crippled aircraft, but its targeting systems couldn't compute a firing solution for something moving so erratically. Vasquez regained consciousness just in time to see the alien machine filling her cracked canopy, its plasma cannon rotating desperately to bring her into its sights. She pulled back on her stick, using her remaining engine to lift the A-10's nose just enough to catch the walker's upper section. The impact was less devastating than the first, but it was enough to topple the machine and send it crashing into one of its companions. 2 walkers down, 2 remaining. But her aircraft was finished, its remaining engine failing and its control surfaces barely responsive. Vasquez prepared for the inevitable crash landing, checking her ejection seat one final time. Below her, Martinez and his team were loading the last group of children onto an improvised transport made from salvaged Zephyrian vehicles. The remaining escort walkers were moving to intercept, but their coordination was broken, their collective consciousness disrupted by the loss of their command unit. Ghost, this is Banshee. I've cleared you a path, but you need to move now. My aircraft is going down. Martinez's voice came back clear and determined. Roger, Banshee. We've got all civilians loaded and we're moving to extraction point Alpha. Outstanding work up there. Vasquez felt a surge of pride as she fought to keep her crippled aircraft stable. The children were safe. The mission was complete, and the Zephyrians had learned something important about human determination. Sometimes the old ways really were the best ways. Her A-10 hit the ground at over 200 kilometers per hour, its reinforced structure absorbing the impact in a shower of sparks and debris. But the cockpit remained intact, its armored shell protecting her from the worst of the crash. As consciousness faded again, Vasquez could see human transport vehicles speeding away from the evacuation site, carrying 300 children toward safety. Above them, the first ships of the human relief fleet were entering orbit, their weapons charging as they prepared to teach the Zephyrians the price of threatening Earth's children. The battle for New Eden was just beginning, but thanks to 6 Navy SEALs and 1 suicidal A-10 pilot, humanity had already won the war. The galaxy would remember this day as the moment when the Zephyrians learned why humans were considered the most dangerous species in known space. Not because they were stronger or faster or more advanced, but because when their young were threatened, they would face impossible odds with nothing but determination and the absolute refusal to surrender. In the end, that was enough.